You're listening to the Chapter a Day Bible Study. I'm John Stange, and today we're in Genesis 40. Joseph interprets the dreams of the cupbearer and baker. Genesis 40 is one of those chapters that feels quiet at first glance. Joseph is still in prison. Life hasn't changed much since he was falsely accused and locked away. And yet, as we read the story slowly, we start to see God working in places that might feel a little overlooked. This chapter lets us watch God shape Joseph's character in the waiting, and it invites us to see Jesus in Joseph's faithful posture. It also gives us permission to be honest about our own frustration when life feels stuck, while still trusting that God hasn't stepped away. The chapter opens with Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker landing in prison after offending their master. Genesis 40 verse 3 says, "They were put in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison where Joseph was confined." So Joseph isn't only suffering, he's also serving. Even before the dreams enter the picture, Joseph's heart is already visible. In verse 4, it says, "The captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them, and he attended them." Joseph is actually caring for others during a painful season of his own life. That detail matters because it shows us something God loves to develop in his people, a heart that remains faithful even when circumstances feel unfair. When the cupbearer and baker each have puzzling dreams on the same night, Joseph notices their troubled faces. He asks, "Why are your faces downcast today?" We see that in verse 7. That question is simple, but it reveals Joseph's compassion. He's not absorbed in his own hardship. He cares about their confusion and their fear. And then Joseph says something that points us straight toward a bigger story. In verse 8, he responds, "Do not interpretations belong to God?" Joseph could have tried to impress them with his own insight, but instead, he points away from himself and toward the Lord. That posture shows humility and trust, and it also prepares us to look for Jesus, the one who reveals mysteries, speaks truth, and brings clarity where confusion once lived. Joseph first interprets the dream of the cupbearer. He says in verse 13, "In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office." That's good news. Joseph also asks the cupbearer to remember him when this prediction comes true. He explains the injustice he's suffered, saying he was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews and that he has done nothing to deserve imprisonment. Joseph's honesty isn't bitterness, it's simply the truth of what he's endured. But then the baker shares his dream, and Joseph speaks plainly to him. And the interpretation Joseph gives him isn't something pleasant. In fact, in verse 19, he says this, "In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from you and hang you on a tree." Joseph doesn't twist the message to avoid discomfort. He honors God by telling the truth. As a pastor, this is something that I think has great value. If you're ever put in a position of leadership or a position of teaching or a position of influence where you're called upon to speak hard truths, make sure you tell the truth. Speak the hard truth, even if it isn't always popular to do so. Now, both interpretations that Joseph is able to give as the Lord enables him to do so, both of them prove accurate. Verse 22 confirms this, stating that Pharaoh hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. The chapter then ends with a difficult line. Verse 23 says, "Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him." After all Joseph did for him, after the kindness, attention, and truthfulness, Joseph is forgotten. This ending hits people in different ways. Some readers feel the weight of being overlooked, and others read this and feel frustrated for Joseph. Some feel encouraged to keep trusting God in seasons that feel directionless. Well, whatever you happen to feel when hearing what happens in this passage or reading about it yourself, I think it's helpful to remember that this is not the end of Joseph's story, and it's not the end of God's work. The forgetfulness of the cupbearer creates a delay, but not a failure. God uses that delay to position Joseph for something far bigger than he could have imagined. When we see Joseph sitting in that prison, faithfully caring for people and trusting God with each unknown detail, we're reminded of Jesus. Joseph points us to the one who suffered injustice with complete righteousness. He points us to the one who served others while enduring pain, the one who remained faithful when forgotten and rejected by people who should have remembered him. Jesus also entered a place of suffering. He was misunderstood, falsely accused, and treated unfairly. Yet, like Joseph, he trusted the Father fully. Jesus spoke truth with compassion. He paid attention to the troubled, the anxious, and the confused. He revealed mysteries that only God can explain. He showed mercy when others would have turned away. He faced a greater injustice than Joseph ever did, and he did it willingly so that we could be restored. Another way this chapter points toward Jesus is through the pattern of exaltation after suffering. Joseph is about to move from a forgotten prisoner to a powerful leader. That shift won't happen in this chapter, but the story is building toward it. Well, Jesus also walked a path of humiliation before exaltation. Philippians 2:8 reminds us that he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And then in Philippians 2:9 we read, "Therefore God has highly exalted him." The same God who lifted up his son is about to lift up Joseph. Genesis 40 encourages anyone who feels stuck or overlooked. It tells us that God sees what others forget. It gently reminds us that God's work sometimes unfolds in quiet places and long delays. Joseph didn't know the timing, but he trusted the one who did. Jesus trusted the Father perfectly, and because of that, we have every reason to trust him with our unknowns. So when we read this chapter, we're invited to slow down and notice God's faithfulness in those quiet moments. We're encouraged to trust him when our story feels incomplete. And we're reminded to look at Jesus, who stayed faithful in his darkest moments so that we could live with hope in ours. Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Chapter a Day Bible Study. For more resources to help you in your walk with Christ and your understanding of the Bible, please visit my website at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. And if you'd like to partner with me by becoming a supporter of this ministry, you'll see a few options to do so, again, at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com or in the description of this episode. As always, thank you for your prayers, thank you for your support, and thank you for your willingness to share this content with others. Have a great day, and I'll see you again right here tomorrow.